We are taught that civilizations collapse because they fail to plan, because leaders grow corrupt, because resources run dry, because enemies arrive. These explanations feel solid, practical, comforting, but they hide a quieter contradiction. Some societies had wealth and foresight, and still unraveled. Others endured scarcity, chaos, and invasion, and somehow adapted. So perhaps collapse does not begin with material failure at all. Perhaps it begins with something less visible, a way of thinking, a habit of mind, a forgotten restraint. Philosophy, we're told, belongs to classrooms and dusty books. It is reflection after the fact, commentary, not action, luxury, not survival. And yet, when civilizations fail, what disappears first is not technology or armies, but judgment, the ability to pause, to question impulse, to restrain certainty. So a quieter question emerges, almost against our will. What if collapse is not a technical failure, but a philosophical one? When thought was survival. In the ancient world, philosophy was not abstract. It was survival training. Long before it became academic, philosophy was a discipline of attention, a way to see clearly under pressure. In early China, thinkers worried less about metaphysics than about disorder. Confucius asked how humans could live without tearing society apart. His answer was not force, but cultivation, ritual, restraint, self-examination. In Greece, the earliest philosophers did not seek comfort. They sought limits. Socrates didn't offer solutions. He asked questions until certainty collapsed under its own weight. In India, the Upanishads whispered that desire itself might be the problem, that clinging creates suffering, that restraint could be a form of freedom. Across cultures, something strange repeats. Philosophy does not promise progress. It warns against excess. It asks humans to slow down just enough to notice when their own momentum becomes dangerous. And for a time, societies listened. The invisible rule. There is a pattern hiding beneath these traditions. It appears again and again, though never stated the same way. A single rule, simple enough to sound unimpressive. Power must limit itself. Not because someone forces it to, but because it understands what happens if it doesn't. In Athens, this idea surfaced as moderation. In Rome, as mixed governance. In Buddhism, as non-attachment. In Stoicism, as control of desire. In Confucianism, as ritual restraint. Different languages, same intuition. Civilizations that last tend to embed breaks into their own momentum. They build rituals that slow ambition, norms that shame excess, institutions that fragment authority, stories that warn against hubris. These are not moral decorations. They are stabilizers, and when they fade, something subtle changes in the air. The moment before the fall. Collapse rarely begins with catastrophe. It begins with confidence, with the feeling that restraint is no longer necessary. Rome, at its height, believed itself eternal. Philosophy became fashionable, aesthetic, admired, quoted, but no longer practiced. Stoicism turned into a badge rather than a discipline. Elites spoke of virtue while pursuing expansion without limit. The same pattern appears elsewhere. In late dynastic China, rituals remained, but sincerity thinned. In late Abbasid Baghdad, brilliance outpaced humility. In Enlightenment Europe, reason transformed from guide into idol. The danger is not ambition. It is ambition without inner resistance. Philosophy, when alive, interrupts momentum. When hollowed out, it becomes decoration, and momentum runs free. The quiet death of restraint. There is a moment every civilization seems to pass through. A moment when limits feel unnecessary, when growth feels natural, when expansion feels justified, when dissent feels inconvenient. At that point, philosophy changes tone. It stops asking uncomfortable questions and starts offering reassurance. It explains why power is deserved, why dominance is rational, why the present order is inevitable. This is not philosophy anymore. It is permission, and permission accelerates collapse more efficiently than any enemy. Because now, no one is asking, should we? Only, can we? A pattern. Hidden in plain sight. Look closely across history and a strange symmetry appears. Civilizations do not fall when they abandon philosophy. They fall when philosophy stops restraining them. When thinking becomes justification instead of interruption. When reflection becomes branding. When wisdom is replaced by certainty. The Greek tragedians understood this deeply. Their stories are not about evil villains. They are about good people who go too far while believing they are right. Hubris is not arrogance. It is blindness to limits. And blindness rarely feels dramatic from the inside. It feels like progress. The fracture question. This is where the question turns inward. If collapse follows the loss of restraint, if philosophy once served as a brake rather than an ornament, then what replaces it when it disappears? What slows us down when everything rewards speed? What questions interrupt us when incentives demand certainty? What inner voice asks, gently but persistently, is this too much? The fracture is not historical. It is psychological, and it opens quietly, inside individuals, long before it opens in societies. The rule that changes everything. Across cultures, eras, and traditions, a single rule quietly repeats. Power must be answerable to reflection, not to force, not to outrage, not to popularity, to reflection. Reflection is slow. It resists urgency. It refuses finality. It asks, what are we becoming? What are we rewarding? What are we training ourselves not to notice? When reflection disappears, collapse doesn't arrive immediately. It accelerates silently, because nothing is checking direction anymore. Why this rule is so hard to keep? Reflection offers no dopamine. It produces no spectacle. It rarely wins arguments. It asks for patience in a culture addicted to reaction. And so, across time, societies quietly sideline it. They keep the language of wisdom but discard its discomfort. Philosophy becomes branding. Ethics become slogans. Thought becomes opinion. And slowly, the internal brakes rust. Collapse, then, is not sudden. It is the moment when no one remembers why restraint mattered. A subtle survival strategy. Some traditions understood this danger and designed around it. They embedded slowness into ritual, silence into daily life, contradiction into education. They created spaces where certainty was deliberately unsettled, not to confuse, but to prevent absolutism. These traditions were not trying to make people smarter. They were trying to keep them humble. Because humility, more than intelligence, predicts longevity. The cost of certainty. Certainty feels like strength. It simplifies choices, sharpens identity, unifies groups, but it also collapses nuance. Once a society becomes certain enough, questioning feels like betrayal. And when questioning becomes dangerous, philosophy quietly exits. What replaces it is efficiency, optimization, momentum, and momentum, left unchecked, does not ask where it's going. The echo in our time. We live in an age overflowing with information and starving for reflection. Opinions move faster than thought. Certainty travels faster than doubt. Confidence outpaces wisdom. And yet, beneath the noise, a familiar tension hums. A sense that speed has outgrown meaning. That systems are powerful but brittle. That complexity is outpacing comprehension. The ancient problem returns, wearing modern clothes. Not a failure of knowledge, a failure of restraint. Philosophy as a brake, not a map. Perhaps philosophy was never meant to tell us where to go, only when to slow down. Not to offer answers, but friction. Not to dominate thought, but interrupt it. In this sense, philosophy is not about progress. It is about survival. A civilization can survive ignorance. It can survive scarcity. It can even survive chaos. But it struggles to survive certainty. The quiet test. The real test of a society is not what it builds. It is what it refuses to do, even when it could. What limits does it honor when no one is watching? What questions does it still allow to be asked? What doubts does it protect? Because those doubts, uncomfortable, slow, unresolved, are not weaknesses. They are load-bearing. The unfinished thought. So could philosophy prevent collapse? Not by providing answers, not by predicting the future, but by preserving a certain inner hesitation, a refusal to mistake power for wisdom. The civilizations that endure longest may not be the boldest or the richest. They may simply be the ones that never stop asking, should we? And mean it. Reflective echo. There is no final warning carved in stone, no prophecy waiting to be decoded. Only a quiet pattern, repeating across centuries. When reflection fades, momentum rules. When momentum rules, collapse becomes invisible, until it isn't. Philosophy does not save civilizations by telling them what to do. It saves them by reminding them what not to rush past. And perhaps the most dangerous moment in any era is the one where thinking feels optional, where doubt feels inefficient, where restraint feels outdated. Because that is usually the moment when collapse has already begun, not as an event, but as a decision made unconsciously, day by day. The question then lingers softly. If philosophy once served as humanity's brake, what are we using instead? And how long can momentum carry us before it stops listening at all? Subscribe Timeless Questions channel for more thought-provoking stories about philosophy, history, and the unseen forces shaping our world.